July 12th, 2021. Present practice. I'd encourage you all to join me on those present practicing breaths in the coming videos, or even at the end of this video. This video's title is going to be The Power of Stillness. Now let's read what I wrote down this morning. Stillness leads to silence, and silence speaks. I am grateful for this present moment. What is the difference between the who, what, how, for the you? I've started doing this real quick kind of morning, let's call it present practicing. And it's a present that I want to gift to you all, that I've started practicing. Anyways, the question that I have at the end is really just something that I was coming to the realization of wonder. And if you have any answers as to what is the difference between the who, what, how for the you, and what that really just means is how are you versus who are you versus what are you. What is the difference between those statements? And I made another video on this called How Are You? But if you have any answers based off of that video or anything that you know about, let me know. You can comment that down below. With that being said, like I said, this video's title is The Power of Stillness. Now I will be talking a bit about the realizations I've had with this, what inspired this, the practical applications for this, and that's most of what I have for you all. That's the present, because this is the present. Anyways, essentially, stillness speaks. The inspiration behind the power of stillness, really, comes from the book Stillness Speaks, written by Eckhart Tolle. And it might sound, let's call it contradictory, hypocritical, but at the end, it's a very powerful statement when you truly not only hear it, but you realize it. As I've realized, there's different steps to realization, if you want to call it that. There's the hearing, which is you hear, or let's call it hearing / seeing. They're similar sensory perceptions, right? That are essentially just called, let's call them receptors, right? That helped the mind, at least, help the mind receive the information. So, whether it's you hearing this, or whether it's you reading this, in this case it was reading for me because I read the book Stillness Speaks, shouts at Eckhart Tolle, and when you read it, there will be a processing. It's almost like, I might make a diagram for this and explain this more in another video, but the point I'm making is the words that you read are processed, or first received by the mind, and then sent as signals through some sort of interpreter. And whatever I'm saying right now is not necessarily scientific in proof, or in terms of where I'm trying to go with that. What I'm trying to really just say at the end is, whatever I'm sharing right now is maybe not a fact. It's just how I've realized it through the awareness and experience that I've had. Anyways, you read some words off the book. The words connect. More than words, it's actually letters. It starts off with letters. The letters connect to create sounds, and those sounds will connect to make words. And these words will connect with the spaciousness or the stillness within each other word in the sentence. And if you keep going, you'll realize that it's a very complex yet quick process that happens, and we're just so conditioned into doing it naturally that we don't even think about it, which is cool. And it takes a second to realize how appreciative we should be for this body and mind that we have, to read and to almost literally experience what someone else is experiencing just through reading some sounds and connecting the dots. That's literally what it is. Anyways, you see some sounds, or you see the letters, and that becomes sounds, and then the mind interprets it, or the brain, if you want to maybe use similar terms for the mind or the brain, and it gets interpreted, it gets analyzed, and then gets understood. They're like, okay, that makes sense. That's the understanding aspect. But then there's the realization. It's really just a deeper understanding. Hearing it and understanding it with the analytical or logical mind is understanding, but then having an actual experience out of the answer, if you want to call it that, or the words, or the message, whatever it might be, that, or the truth, experiencing that is the realization. Now, I know this is a slight little tangent of where I went, and I'm aware of that, so let's kind of redirect the focus back to this topic of the power of stillness. It's interesting because literally, as I was talking and I was making those examples with regards to the space between each word and letter, that is the moment of stillness. It's almost like, if you've heard of the Tao, for instance, and this is the very limited understanding I've had with the Tao, but the example I heard about it was the idea that, if you were to have a pendulum that was swinging left and right, the sweet spot where there's essentially like no quote-unquote movement is at the base. So it's moving left, the right, and then there's that middle quote-unquote path. Again, maybe it's not the right term that I'm using here, but that sweet spot is of no movement. Again, quote-unquote. That is a stillness. It's the space of non-duality, in a way. Anyways, where I was going with all of this is that being in that space, or being still, allows you to enter the space. There we go. Being still allows you to enter the space. Enter spaciousness, that is. And when you enter spaciousness, you are entering presence, or being present is what you're entering. And now you might wonder, okay, this is cool, and like, maybe it makes sense, maybe I'm confused, and if you're confused, that's okay, comment down below. Hopefully I'll message back and answer the confusion that you have. It's okay, because I'm sort of making this, as I've mentioned before, it's a completely raw video series. No edits, no nothing. It's speaking from this moment. That is the important aspect of this video. Also kind of itching with the several mosquito bites that are happening in this present moment. But it's all about just connecting to that, and let's make this a little more, I'm going to use an analogy to explain where I'm going and why it's so impactful, right? The power of stillness. You see, I think Eckhart talks about this, and it's the idea that Jesus had referenced learning from a flower. Because if you think about it, the flower, literally, let's just say a beautiful flower, it's sitting on the grass, you're observing it, you're being still with it, you will come to realize how the flower is not thinking about the future, it's not thinking about the past, it's just present, and it's so beautiful, the beingness from that flower, the beingness. The same principle applies to stillness with regards to the flower. Kind of forgot the thought, so maybe I repeated something. But the point I'm making is that we must truly learn, as Jesus said, from the flower, to just be present, to be still. When you're still, you're able to literally enter the space of spaciousness. And what is spaciousness, you might be wondering? Well, it's like I mentioned, it's that gap between, as I'm talking right now. Notice how there's some space. Maybe you have thoughts, maybe you didn't, but if you didn't have thoughts, that is the spaciousness, that is the stillness within you. Again, stillness allows you to access the dimension of spaciousness, and then spaciousness allows you to be present. Yeah, just simple as that. And going off of that, I've come to realize how Eckhart actually, again, helped me realize this. Eckhart Tolle. Shouts out Eckhart Tolle. That, yes, there's just one level of understanding with regards to the tree and how, we're all connected, we're all one. See, that's cool, right? And you can understand that with the logical mind. But then again, there's still a gap of truly realizing or experiencing. Because yes, I mean, again, this is great, but if you can understand how half of your lungs is resting on the tree, literally without the tree you're not going to get the oxygen, then there's no need to cut down the tree. I mean, there's no need to even talk about morality. It's just common sense at that point. That's great. It's a very relatively deep understanding or spiritual awakening or realization. But to take it a step further, what you'll come to realize is that the tree and literally everything else in this universe, literally, let's talk with the universe, right? Let's talk about the universe. Is, again, as I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but it's 99.9% space. Matter, or what we see, is 1%, if not even less than that. Yet the mind, because that's all it kind of sees and it chooses to see, makes that everything. But the reality is that nothing is actually more of everything than the thing in everything. I know that's maybe a little confusing, but I'm going to say that one more time. No things, so not nothing actually, no thing makes up most of everything than the things in everything. The things being the material. So, with that being said, what you'll realize is even not only does .9% of the universe contain space, but even the space within the material, even within me, within the tree, that is also 99.9% space. So literally, again, yeah, there's that one understanding and realization that, yeah, without the tree we can't live and so on, which is great, but taking it a step deeper, when you truly realize that the tree is 99.9% space and so are you will literally realize how you are essentially the same and truly connected. And it's such a beautiful realization. Now, tying this all together with hopefully a ribbon, just as a gift, because it's a present, right? It's the present moment. When you're able to connect, so you can see it, hear it, but then realizing it is different, right? When you're realizing you're able to connect directly with it, not through the mind, but through a deeper beingness. With that tree, for instance, you're connecting with stillness. When you connect the stillness, it allows for the access to spaciousness, which is no thingness, and that allows you to be present. And now let's wrap this up and make this more practical. You might be wondering, okay, wow, this is cool. I maybe understood some stuff from you and maybe not, maybe more confused than not. If anything, I mean, this video series is going to be for sure an iterative process, so I will hope to learn and get much more clear with being clear with you all. And it will be a journey which I hope to do, or plan to do, I'm not going to say hope, plan to do every day. So these will get more fine-tuned and polished naturally, without any edits, again, as I've mentioned. It's all raw, and it's real. That's the key. It's a real, raw footage video. Real, raw realization. There we go. And the practical aspect of this comes down to, for instance, just an example. So this will hopefully help you use this analogy to understand other aspects, right, or practical uses, that is. You have a project due in 2 hours, and it's super late at night. There's a deadline. You see, literally most of the mind activity, and science has actually proven this too, most of the mind activity, or most of the thoughts that we have, see, the mind is really just thoughts, and really just thoughts. And the thoughts is, when the thoughts kind of connect, or like create, essentially when the thoughts take up a certain amount of space, the accumulation of that is the mind. And literally most of the thoughts that you have are not even yours. They're just from the outside. Reflections. things you've heard, sensory recepted things, not even yours. You might think you're thinking, but it's really just your system creating this mind, which is just a reflection of what it hears and takes in. But going back to the science aspect of it, most of the thoughts that you have are actually useless. Science has proven this thing about 80 to 90%, they say. So if you were to think about it that way, and again, I know this is not the most accurate depiction, because you can argue for the case that, yeah, just because thoughts are that way when I'm working and I'm in this flow state, then there's no thoughts, and we'll connect to that in a second. But assuming that's the case, and even when you work, 80% of your thoughts are, let's say 75%, 3/4 of your thoughts, make it 50%, just to be very, very lenient. That means literally out of the 2 hours that you have left, 1 hour is gone thinking. That's you being nervous or anxious or worried that it's due, and you procrastinating, your mind wandering, and you're literally, thoughts you see are part of the material in a way. They're energy forms. It is not stillness. They're, if anything, things that take you away from stillness, take you away from the spaciousness. But when you learn to be still, then you're able to be in that spaciousness, and then you're able to be present, which will in turn help you to be in that flow state of whatever you have to do, in that working mode. Just be in that zone, as people like to call it. Whether it's working out, whether it's, again, anything that's due, just as a more practical of an example. So, now you might wonder, okay, cool, I get that, how now? So, there's, I'm getting swarmed alive, that's interesting. A lot of mosquitoes around me, just getting a bit left and right, but that's okay, with nature. With that being said, that was a little funny of a sidetrack, but the point is, some good examples or ways or methods to be accessing stillness would include being with nature, to listen to the sounds that you hear of the birds chirping, touching the grass from the ground and literally grounding yourself and being present with the earth, without the phone, that is. Conscious eating, conscious brushing are all great examples too, where you're just focusing on that one thing. Conscious eating meaning you're just focusing on the food, focusing on the food entering you, and you're not watching or doing anything else. Those are all great examples, very practical. You're essentially learning, and here's the key, and I want to wrap this up real quick. And I appreciate you watching. If you're watching up until this point, hit the like button. I would love to hear and see if these are things that you guys are connecting with or not, and that's okay if you're not, because I'm going to be constantly working on these. But the point is, it's all about practicing with the small stuff. When you practice the small and easy stuff, then you are essentially working to be prepared, to be present for the hard stuff. So whether it's brushing your teeth, I mean, it's not really a difficult endeavor, but if you're able to truly practice being present, or just take a minute during your work break and walk in your backyard or walk on some grass and just listen to the birds chirping, relatively easy and quick thing you can practice. That is you practicing accessing stillness, or being still, which helps you access spaciousness, which in turn helps you be present. So when you're able to do that, it'll carry over, and eventually when you do face that hard, difficult endeavor task of finishing that deadline that's due in 2 hours, then it becomes a lot easier to practice. So those are some practical examples. Another real quick one is something that's obviously well known. It's just to take up a form of meditation practice. You know, whether it's guided, unguided, I'd highly recommend Isha Kriya. It's a very powerful meditation practice that Sadhguru himself has created and offered, but there's a bunch of other guided meditations, so whichever one works for you. You're essentially dedicating time to be still, which helps you dedicate yourself to being available to access spaciousness, which helps you become present. And long story short, these are the tools, these are the ways to do that, of being still, the power of stillness. When you're still, you're essentially learning how to be dynamic within everything that you do, because you're truly accessing the space of no thingness with the activity of you doing something crazy. For instance, another quick example, and hopefully this is making sense, is you're going on this really excruciating hike, and it's like, you know, really difficult, and now your mind's like, oh, I want to quit, I want to stop, I want to sit, but then, you know, you got to be back by a certain time, it's getting dark, and all these factors. If you listen to your mind, you're not going to be still, you'll just be taking longer and blah blah blah. The point is that if you're still, you're going to be, well, when you're still, I don't mean you just sit there and do nothing. What I'm talking about is internal stillness. So hopefully that's making this more clear. It's internal stillness. Now you're internally still, you're just present. You're still accessing the spaciousness, which helps you be present. No thoughts are even arising of you worrying or complaining, and you're just completing the hike. Very practical. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully this was something that was able to help you and realize the power of stillness. And if you have any other video requests, please comment that out. If you have any other video requests, please comment that down below. And with that, make a great day. Take it joyfully. Present practice. Stay conscious. And ecstasy.